Hello everybody and welcome back to another video here, and as you can see we finally have another computer in the studio here, and in today's video we're going to be hopefully restoring this machine here and getting it back and working again. This computer is the Macintosh 2SI, and it's actually the final machine I need to complete my lineup of mid-90s or early 90s Apple computers, the Macintosh Classic, the LC, and the 2SI. Amazing condition. It does have a pretty nice chunk out of it here and here from being dropped at some point, I assume, but other than that, it's not beyond repair here. However, I have now opened this up, and who knows what could be lying on the inside.
Oh no. Okay, so battery is gone, but look at all the corrosion. I'm not sure if this works anymore, but I guess we're gonna try it out. I'm at least glad that the battery isn't in there. Holy shit. I think it would be smart before we tear this apart just to go ahead and turn it on and make sure it works. Which I'm not very optimistic for now, but this also looks like it took some damage at some point, and the screw in the back is kind of bent. I'm actually blown away. So the power supply itself appears to work just fine. The fans spin up. Now, then again, this could be just running off the 120 volts AC, but I doubt it. Okay, so I brought a monitor out here, and I'm going to go ahead and try to test this a second time, but the issue is, if I go to try to plug this in, the motherboard just moves backwards. So I'm going to hope that that's enough connectivity for now. Okay, so when I clicked the power button, it did turn on, but this is all we're getting on the screen so far. Not exactly what you want to see, but honestly, the fact that anything in this is actually functional is really mind-blowing to me.
So far, this computer here has already taught me a very important lesson, and that is that it's very important to double-check what you're getting yourself into when it comes to buying vintage electronics like this, and even modern stuff too. But especially when you're dealing with something as failure prone and as risky as vintage electronics, especially these old Mac machines, it's very important to check the eBay listing pictures, unlike what I did when I bought this impulsively, and make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, and that probably would have saved me a lot of money. But I figure since I already have this computer here, I might as well make a cool video out of restoring it, and it might be pretty inspiring to some other people who have dealt with computers that have rather unrepairable situations like this one. And I figured since I've now dealt with a computer that's rusted like this, I might as well go ahead and explain why this can happen, at least as is the case with this particular computer. Taking a look at this motherboard here that was in this computer, you'll notice the area where most of the corrosion takes place is around this middle area, and that's because that's where the PRAM or parameter RAM battery was originally. And basically these computers will have a half double cell or double A cell size battery here that's used for storing system settings, time, and just various things like that. And basically what happened is not only was this computer probably exposed to humidity or something, because I think it was probably obviously stored away in someone's garage or basement or attic or something like that, but the battery was also left in it, and in turn it corroded all over the motherboard and some of the internal brackets and shielding and stuff inside this computer, which means we now have to figure out how to not only clean this up, but also hopefully get this motherboard working again. Now, I will go ahead and say I've seen a lot of people deal with battery bombed, as we call it, motherboards like these for these old Macs, and typically it's not going to be very easy to salvage this, so there is a very significant chance we're going to have to end up buying a new motherboard for it, and as sad as that is, it's sort of just how it goes. So, that's basically what today's project is going to be. We're going to be trying to salvage this vintage Macintosh and seeing if we can get it working again, hopefully. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started actually repairing this thing. I also just want to take a quick minute out of today's video to announce the sponsor of this horribly horrific project here, PCBWay. PCBWay now provides a whole host of PCB prototyping services, including rigid flex PCBs, surface mount stencils, and even assembly of your boards, as well as prototyping services such as 3D printing, sheet metal fabrication, CNC machining, injection molding, and even OEM manufacturing. So if you happen to be in need of printed circuit boards or other prototyping services for your project, be sure to give PCBWay.com a try. And now back to the video. Of course, in order to determine how bad the motherboard damage is, the first thing I'm going to want to do is take this computer completely apart to reveal the motherboard. Now, early Macs like these from the 90s are really easy to disassemble. As a matter of fact, both this Mac and the Macintosh LC are completely held together entirely with clips for the most part. The floppy drive was the easiest thing to remove. It's just two simple clips that all you have to do is simply move back and lift the drive out, like on the Macintosh LC. The computer did not have a hard drive, so I didn't have to worry about that. However, the NuBus to PDS card adapter was really difficult to remove, mainly because of this rusted screw that was in it. And eventually, it just snapped off, and I was able to remove the card. And with that out, it reveals what's normally a pain to get out on these computers, and that is the power supply and the fan. Now, the reason they're so difficult to remove is because they're located both right next to each other, and the fan actually covers some of the clips you need to remove the power supply with. And so typically what you want to do is remove the fan first and then the power supply. However, I ended up removing the power supply first by sticking a screwdriver into the clip, as I didn't know the other proper way to do it, but it worked, and I got the power supply and the fan out. And at this point, the motherboard slides out almost exactly like the Macintosh LC, and as you can see, it is pretty damaged. I pretty much tried everything I could to save this board. I removed all the capacitors to try to see how bad it was damaged under those, because they were also leaking. I tried to desolder some of the crystal oscillators, as they looked like they were badly affected, but eventually they just sort of snapped right off when I tried to pull them out of the board. And I discovered that the rust had seeped under there as well, and the corrosion was really bad. And at this point was when I decided to just give up on fixing this board, as if it affected just the surface level components this bad, it was most likely had already gotten in and damaged some of the inner traces in between the different layers of the PCB, and there's no way you can really fix that. So I decided it was easier just to buy a new motherboard. Fortunately, I was able to find a replacement motherboard on eBay and order it. However, since it will take a few days to get here, I got to work cleaning up and repairing anything else with this computer that I could fix with the parts I already have. Starting with the case, for the most part all I really had to do here is clean off all the dust that was on this thing, but there's also a few stickers and some tape I had to remove as well. One of the front corners was also pretty badly dented here, likely from being dropped or something like that. I tried to fix this, but I think it really only ended up making it worse, so I just gave up on that, and it's not really that noticeable anyway. I also wanted to take care of this RF shield back here. Now, it's way too rusty to save, and quite honestly, it wouldn't be worth the trouble to save it anyway, so I'm going to cut it out of here for now, which of course leaves these rust stains we'll have to take care of soon. In order to remove these rust stains, I ended up just scraping them away with an X-Acto knife. However, I wasn't able to clean it up entirely, and I still probably need to paint over this at some point in order to get rid of the bare plastic spots, which still look pretty bad. Next up, I wanted to take a look at this NuBus adapter card. I'm not sure if these are really common or not, but I'm pretty sure they come with most of these computers. It overall didn't really need much work, but I decided I would go ahead and remove the rest of the screw that broke off earlier. I was able to get it out by twisting at it with these grippers here, and here's the remains of that screw. I also removed the PCB from the metal bracket, as I needed to remove and replace this electrolytic capacitor here. And yes, I know I should be using surface mount parts to replace this, but the standard through-hole components are cheaper, and I already have a bunch of them around, and when done properly it can be installed cleanly into the board. I also used the bench grinder to remove most of the remaining surfaced rust on this metal bracket here. Next up, I wanted to take a look at this floppy drive. Now, it's very common for these old Mac floppy drives to get gummed up and stop working, and some of them have issues with the ejector gears. This particular one also appears to be really dusty, so I wanted to remove the drive and get it all cleaned up and check the ejector mechanism. I've covered this process in more detail in other videos, and I plan on doing a tutorial on the process soon, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, basically what I needed to do here was disassemble the floppy drive and clean the old grease off, and clean up all the moving parts, then apply fresh grease to them. Also, I went ahead and sanded off the rust from the bracket here as well, as it was affected pretty badly. Okay, so it's been a couple of days and the new motherboard has finally arrived, and we'll go ahead and get it unpacked real quick and check it out to see what kind of work it will need. Typically, vintage Mac motherboards like these will need to be recapped, in other words, replacing the old electrolytic capacitors, as they can leak and corrode the board, but taking a look at this board, they don't appear to be in too terrible of condition. We'll still end up replacing them though. Comparing the new board to the old board, you could really just start to see now how badly the old one is damaged. For the motherboard, I'll be using this pack of through-hole electrolytic capacitors. I know this isn't ideal, but they're more affordable and I can basically mount them flush to the board like you would a regular surface mount capacitor. Plus, I don't plan on reselling this computer or motherboard anyway, so I'm not terribly worried about anyone else getting a hold of it and having to replace them. The first caps I'll replace are these two barrel-style capacitors. I already had the values for these on hand, but since these ones aren't barrel variants, I'll fold the legs flush and use the optional surface mount pads that Apple included on this board. Next, I'll go through and remove all the surface mount electrolytics. They all happen to be the same values, so that makes this project a lot easier. I'll clean up the pads and remove the remaining leads, and I'll also trim down the leads on the new capacitors and solder them in place onto the surface mount pads. Also, just because I'm doing it this way for my particular computer does not mean you have to do it on yours, and I'm not encouraging anyone to do it this way. I'm just showing you how I did it here, and it worked just fine for me. And at this point, all I really have to do is reinstall the motherboard back into the computer and reassemble the rest of the case, and then we'll be able to test it out and see if it actually works after all this work. Okay, so here we have it. This is the fully recapped Macintosh 2SI. I've got it all hooked up to this monitor and keyboard and mouse and everything. And we're going to go ahead and see if it actually powers on. And I'm kind of nervous because I haven't done it yet. And I haven't turned it on yet. And if this doesn't work, it's going to be pretty expensive. So I'm hoping for the best here. Let's go ahead and power it on, I guess. All right. Oh, yeah, there we go. Wow. Yeah, so it looks like we got a mouse pointer in the screen, and we've got the gray background, so that's very typical for Macs this era, so that's a good sign. Now I just want to wait a little bit longer and see if the question mark with the floppy disk comes up. And there we go. So at this point it appears like it's working just fine, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a disk here that we could boot this off of, and we're going to see if we can get it to start up. Oh wow. Yeah, there we go, it's booting up. Yeah, that's pretty crazy, especially considering what this computer started out as earlier in the video. And at this point, really all that's left to do is to get a hard drive in this thing. My go-to hard drive device for vintage Macs is the Blue SCSI. It operates off a microSD card and plugs right into the SCSI connector on any vintage Apple computer. I did a full video on this product a couple years back, so if you want to know more about this, then go there. But basically, It didn't work initially on this computer, and my initial idea was that the SCSI cable was bad, so I tore open my Macintosh SE, which had a working one. I reinstalled the device and tried it again, however it still didn't work, so I next wanted to check to make sure that the device itself was okay, so I broke out the Macintosh LC, which I know it works in, and sure enough it booted. It was around this time that I noticed that when checking the indicator lights on the Blue SCSI, when connected to the 2SI, I didn't see anything from either of the LEDs. Now some vintage Macs actually don't supply power through the SCSI cables, and fortunately the Blue SCSI team included a standard 4-pin connector on the side of the device for use with computers like these. I found a matching connector that I had harvested a while ago off an old power supply, and then I grabbed an old adapter with a male Molex connector on it since I couldn't find the correct 4-pin connector to plug straight into the board. The finished adapter basically takes the original hard drive power from the adapter cable on the Mac and reroutes it to this 4-pin connector, which plugs directly into the Blue SCSI. It's not very polished, but it should work hopefully. Plugging it into the computer at first, it didn't work. However, it turns out the connector wasn't all the way in, and now we have working lights in the device. I rebooted the computer, and sure enough, we now have a hard drive. I'll go ahead and play some games to the computer now that it's all up and running again. Starting with Tetris, and also yes, I know I totally suck at this, please don't diss me in the comments. I also wanted to go into the monitor settings to see what color settings this thing was capable of. Unfortunately, we can only get 256 colors, probably because the computer doesn't have a separate VRAM stick like my LC does currently. So yeah, I have to admit I'm really pretty proud of what we were able to accomplish with this Macintosh 2SI. When I first opened the computer up, I was pretty nervous to whether we would ever be able to get it to work again, and while we did unfortunately have to buy a new motherboard for it, I have to say it's pretty worth it considering what this is now. And we were able to take something that would otherwise be a completely useless piece of junk or just a parts machine and turn it back into a fully working computer that I can now enjoy using. And there are still a few other things I want to do with this computer. The first is I need to recap the power supply. The power supply also has the original capacitors in it still. They need to be replaced, there's no doubt about that, but I didn't want to keep delaying this video any longer because it's already been like 3 weeks since I've uploaded to the channel and 7 months since I've actually posted a legitimate real video on the channel, so I just really need to push out this video. So that will be probably in a later video if I end up just not doing it off camera or something like that, and possibly then too we would also be able to get this Blue SCSI mounted better and design a 3D printed bracket for it. But before this video ends, I have a few extra messages I want to put here. First of all, in case you have not heard yet, we now have a CTR channel Patreon page, and this is where you can help me financially support me to do interesting restoration and just projects in general like this. I want to continue to be able to improve my content quality, upgrade my gear, and buy new and interesting tech for the channel, and part of the way I can do that is through your donations through Patreon. In return for that, I offer early access to all videos on the main channel, including this one right here, and also some behind the scenes content and perks on Discord servers and stuff like that for the channel. So be sure to give it a try, check it out if you're interested in helping support the channel. And also, if you're new here and you enjoyed what you saw and you want to see more content like this, be sure to click the subscribe button and press the notification bell. But anyway, with that said, be sure to also check out my Twitter and Instagram accounts down in the description. I also have an email down there if you want to get in contact with me for something. And with that said, I'll see you guys all next time.